Hello, I'm Stephen Matchett from Campus Morning Mail, and this is Expert Opinion, where we ask people who know what's going on in education and research, what's going on. Expert Opinion is brought to you by Twig Marketing, Australia's original higher education marketing consultancy. Got a brand issue or a message that isn't getting out? Talk to Tim Winkler, tim@twigmarketing.com. Twig Marketing is one word. And thanks to producer Amanda Johnson from Twig, who makes Expert Opinion happen. Last year, the Australian Research Council did not shoot itself in the foot over preprints. It hacked both off in a mishandled attempt to enforce an obscure rule against including preprints in funding applications. The physics community, which has long used preprints, was politely pissed off, and I quote, "It doesn't help to dwell on how or why the rule was implemented or its misalignment with modern publication culture. The important issue now is for the ARC to deal with this problem quickly," Sven Rogge and Nicholas Fisk wrote in CMM. But now the ARC has banned preprints again, announcing last week that they can't be used in the next iteration of research metric Excellence for Research in Australia. This time the council says it has acted after consultation and that feedback was, and I quote, "overwhelmingly supportive of not including preprints as an eligible research output type." Good-o, but what's the problem? Is this just a case of the research establishment sticking to the old journal model? Sven Rogge is here to talk about this and whatever else he wants. Professor Rogge is just appointed Dean of Science at UNSW, but he's here, I imagine, wearing his president's hat at the Australian Institute of Physics. Hello, sir, and thank you for sparing the time.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you for the
Can
kind
I start by asking you about preprints in physics and related fields? How important are they to the development of research?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for the kind introduction. Certainly you can. The preprints are extremely important, and physics has used them for a long time. Preprints allow us to share our results extremely quickly in an absolute open pathway, and they allow other researchers in the world to get access to your findings before they go through the lengthy and rigorous peer review. So the community is very much in favor of peer review, but we need a faster outlet. And the world has seen this with COVID, where fast feedback was extremely important, and COVID pushed also like the biology and medical community to use preprints very openly, and that allowed the fast communication. But in our community, it has always been present. So we were really shocked when the ARC removed this without any consultation at the time. And I agree with the metaphors that you used earlier. Luckily, too late for a lot of future fellowship applicants and DECRA applicants. They retrofitted that and they're allowed it now. And they also tried their best to help the people that were disadvantaged in this. In context of ERA, so while preprints are extremely important, and they're also extremely important in grant applications, because you want to be able to communicate your research that is happening right now. And again, peer reviews can take up to a year. So it's very important to have the preprints in the grant applications. In terms of ERA, in the opinion of the AIP, it's not important because it's only a time delay. Everything that, like a large fraction, and we looked into the numbers of what is published in the preprint ends up in a published journal, and that is captured by ERA. Some things are not, some reports are not, but they're still acknowledged in the community. So we are in favor of keeping the preprints out of ERA to basically keep the already very complicated process of ERA as simple as we can.
Is there a risk that well, let me phrase that a little better. There's a vast amount of data underlining physics, astronomy, et cetera, research. Is that getting out there as quickly as it could, independent of the final written article?
Yes, that is also partly where preprints come in. A lot of reports are published on preprint archives, and they're very important to the community. They are accessible. The findings out of those reports are then again published. So the preprint platform is extremely important for fast information distribution, but also for certain information that will not end up in the published journals. However, the actual final message is in the journal. So while they're extremely important, in the opinion of the ARP, it's not required that they're captured in ERA.
Are there any, I imagine there are other issues that are exciting attention at the moment. I'm thinking perhaps of the national interest test that the ARC is now applying. The AIP wrote to ARC last week about it, from memory.
Yes, so the AIP is very concerned about this for two reasons. There are already, again, delays with the announcement of the DECRA and the future fellowship. So our members are worried. And as last year with the preprints, it's these fellowships that hit early career, like delays in these fellowships that hit early career researchers really hard. These are people hoping to get onto a tenure track position. And if they get this position that is happening, if they don't, and there's a finite time window. So delays in that space are extremely sensitive. So we experienced that again around the national interest test, and members are worried. There's the other issue that while a national interest test in principle is understandable, there is the fear of what that means for fundamental research. And the AIP is very supportive of a broad landscape of research from fundamental blue sky all the way to applied. We're very much in favor of translation, but to have translation in the long run, there needs to be also fundamental research. So we're worried what that means about that. And the second part is transparency. In the old system, even though it was very clunky, if a grant was dismissed based on national interest issues, it was in Parliament, and it was possible to find out which grant was subjected to that, and I was able to criticize that. It's not clear what happens to that transparency and what that process looks like. So in terms of...
Isn't that covered by the Senate ruling that the AIC must advise the Senate on number of grants approved and number not approved by the minister in any given month?
Well, the question is what the new process looks like. It looks like the ARC is changing the process. And I have to acknowledge we're grateful. After our letter with the ARC, the CEO of the ARC arranged a meeting with us. So we'll very much look forward to a constructive dialogue in that regard. But since there is a change in the process, the transparency in the process needs to be maintained. And there's also say if it's dismissed and that is then reported to Senate, there also needs to be a learning opportunity for applicants. There's a rejoinder process for peer review. Like there's a peer review, there's feedback. The applicant is given the chance to feedback on that. If the NIT becomes the equal break or it's equally important evaluation as the peer review, there should also be the opportunity for the applicant to be informed how his NIT was assessed. So before it's actually struck down. So again, we look forward to engage with the ARC to hear what that process looks like and give them feedback from the sector of how we think this can be done in a transparent and equitable way.
So is that a qualified willingness to accept it?
That there is a national interest test in the first place. It's not something we're excited about. But if it's handled in a constructive manner where we acknowledge the importance of a whole landscape of science from fundamental to applied, and if it's done in a transparent manner, we're willing to work with the ARC on that. Yes.
Do your members or the community you represent have any concerns in terms of national security? Are there cases where foreign agents have tried to take physicists out for long lunches, as it were?
Well, not in Australia. Luckily, we're not in Iran where that happens, and we're not supportive of that. I mean, we are in favor of the national interest, and the ARC already has a process in place. With my other hat on, it's a complicated one for the university, but that's not what I'm speaking about right now. So from the perspective of the ARC, we're supportive of having a careful eye on national security. But this is not what this is about. Like the national interest test, that's aside from any evaluation of the national security. The national interest test is the best use of the tax dollar, right? So in that regard, the ARP understands it, but it understands it with the background that it needs to be like a pipeline from fundamental to applied work, and it needs to be transparent what's happening there.
Yeah, the previous government's taken a terrible hiding over the NIT, particularly Minister Tian, who I think introduced the new wording. All I'd say in his defence was he's also a minister who funded the stall dark matter experiment in Victoria, which I think is about as pure research as it gets.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What on that, the link, the emphasis now on research translation. I don't think we know quite what the new government is going to decide, but do you have any sense of an emphasis in policy for your disciplines?
So my understanding, and I briefly met with the minister, is that the new government values translation very well. Like, it's really basically taking that initiative from the last government on, with the urge to be more transparent. So I think we're in good hands in that regard. Of course, the AIP is not political in any way. For us, it's important that science is supported across the discipline. But from what it looks like, all the right things are said. And we're very supportive of that initiative, and are very willing to work with the government if we can participate.
What's the state of funding for fundamental research in physics like? Has there been a change over the last decade or so?
There has, and it's more than a decade. So the ARC budget is basically flat. So like the ARC basically funds all the research in the physical sciences. ARC's budget has been flat in contrast to the NHMRC. And that basically means, taking inflation into account, it's going backwards. The funding is going backwards. There is an uptake of funding in more in the linkage applied space, which is perfectly valid, that we fully support. What we don't support is that, to some degree, science seen as the poor cousin to medicine. While I acknowledge that medicine is extremely important for society, in my opinion, the physical sciences and science in general are equally important and have to be embraced. We would not have mRNA vaccines if there was not a broad support for science.
What are we missing out on? Are there one or two fields, well, multiple fields, where we just are not doing what needs to be done?
Well, we're spread extremely thin, and there is also very much a short-term reactionism. So, for example, bringing Moderna to Australia to have RNA capability was a very much a last-minute push with a lot of political emphasis into that. I would rather see that Australia is proactive in this, looks at its strengths, looks at opportunities, and then embraces companies and brings them in. Like, on the one hand, Australia has the centers of excellence. They have a long time span, and they're very productive. On the other hand, we're not sitting there and working with government to really take the next step and taking our research excellence and building also sort of the industry next to that. Australia really has to get up in gear in that regard.
How is it just a matter of money?
No, it's more than just money. I think it's money and long-term proactive thinking. Like, in terms of, say, if I look at the Moderna RNA effort, the money was in the end not the issue. Yeah. But these deals, you don't break over a knee in no time. You really have to look at important areas for Australia. You have to look at strengths, and you have to long-term invest in that rather than trying to do it in the last minute.
It's very hard for all disciplines that are not medicine. I mean, cure for cancer opens a lot of doors when someone points to that. Much harder to do in your fields.
That's absolutely right. So, I mean, that's why, I mean, to some degree, I understand that medicine has a good run on that. At the same time, say again, RNA is very much hinging on chemistry, nanoscience. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen next to medicine. And we also have, we wouldn't have GPS if someone asked for like a 5-year or 3-year project horizon. there are things that have shaped society in ways to some degree beyond medicine that came out of that physical science pipeline. GPS, the whole IT revolution, it all started basically somewhere in physics, taken over by engineering and society. And we really need that pipeline unless we want to sort of miss the next information age revolution.
Are you happy with the number of students in the pipeline? Undergraduates moving to postgraduates?
No, I'm not. So we're heavily reliant on international talent, which I mean I welcome, but I would like to see more talent in Australia. So on the one hand, the job readiness package is welcome with the focus on STEM education. It has hurt the sector a lot because the funding per student has dropped a lot, right? So if we want to deliver quality education to really be competitive in the world, doing that for significant less, basically for 75% of the money, I don't think that's the way to do it. I think that's the part where you should invest into the education to get the STEM capability into the country, homegrown.
If you had 10 minutes with the minister, as a last question, because I know you're busy, but if you had 10 minutes with the minister in private, what would you suggest needs to be done for physics and related?
Long-term investment into a broad landscape of physical research in the physical sciences, cutting red tape around visas. So right now, like international students are important, and it's absolutely atrocious that they're basically kept on year-long waits. If a visa is denied, well, that is sad, but at least should be done in a reasonable time scale. And seeing basically, we want to see the same championship from the government for the sciences in general, physics in particular, of course, with my hat on, but science in general, as there is medicine, because it is well worth it and it is important for society in the long run. So science should be a very priority, much a priority, yes.
Which is a great, I know you're busy, so we'll leave it there. And that's a great way to finish. I hope you'll come back and talk to us some more. Sven Rogge, President of the Australian Institute of Physics and Dean of Science at UNSW. Thank you for your time, sir. This is Stephen Matchett from Expert Opinion, and we're out.